one of the last head coaches of the Houston Texans, and you got to go back a little bit because before D'Amico Ryans, you had Lovie Smith, you had David Culley, you had interim head coach Romeo Crennel, and then you had a guy that I had quite a few exchanges with back in the day, Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien most recently was working as what? Alabama's offensive coordinator before a brief stint in that same role at Ohio State.
Like a 2-week stint.
Before becoming the head coach at Boston College. Mm-hmm. He did an interview with, I believe, one of his Boston College players.
Oh, no, and then one of them was, I think, Kitty recruited at Penn State too, right?
For all I know, sure. They have poorly placed advertisements to the point where I don't really feel like knowing who they are. I feel like you got to work on your advertisement placement on YouTube. But O'Brien was asked about his time as both a general manager and head coach in Houston. Here's what he had to say.
In the end, that's not who I am. That's another lesson learned, right? Like, you know, I didn't really enjoy being the GM. I didn't enjoy negotiating contracts. I in some respects, I lost relationships with some of the guys that I was coaching, you know, because I didn't really enjoy that.
Mixing
in
money,
my opinion,
yeah.
respects, I lost relationships with some of the guys that I was coaching, you know, because I didn't really enjoy that.
Mixing
in
money,
my opinion,
yeah.
There's very few guys in the history of football that can ever do that.
Yeah.
And they're the greatest of the greats. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I feel like I'm a good coach. I know how to coach. I think you guys know that. But those things I'm not great at. I can evaluate talent. I know how to evaluate talent, but I shouldn't be negotiating contracts and things like that. So
if he shouldn't be negotiating contracts and all of that, he should have known that before he wanted to dive headfirst into that. And there was a time, Joe, where I thought that you want your head coach to have that kind of say because it had worked so well for Bill Belichick in New England. But I was probably overlooking just how great of a mind, football-wise, Belichick is and his ability to do the X's and O's, evaluate talent, find the right guys. O'Brien believed he could do the same thing. And I think part of the reason that he wanted so much of it was because he and Rick Smith, the former general manager of the Texans, were never in alignment on anything. So he pushed for it, and he got it. Perhaps he should have, before pushing for it, realized that it's something that would have been impossible for just about any football coach to do. And what we ended up seeing was that the Houston Texans roster went from being one that had a lot of talent on it to one that was an absolute mess and needed to have Nick Caserio come in and eventually D'Amico Ryans come in, find C.J. Stroud to finally get things back in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, people in life have experienced this where you take a job and you regret it instantly. Remember, I took a job at a restaurant one time, and my first day there, I was like, well, this sucks.
Why did it suck?
I had never worked in a restaurant before. I was making burritos.
Yeah.
But it was like a healthy burrito place.
Oh.
So I just felt like I was just dealing with like vegan Karens on the regular. It wasn't for me. But I needed a job, so it was for me. That's really what it sounds like he's saying there. It's just like, I took this job to what you're saying. It probably made sense to him at the time. And as soon as he took it and realized what he actually had to do, he was like, oh, this isn't great. But he also was just very bad at it. And I really wonder if it's just more even like revisionist history of his own. Of like, he thought he could handle it. His ego thought he could do it. And then once he's failed at it, now he's just saying like, yeah, I wouldn't do that again. Like that almost to me sounds more of like a PR spin to an NFL team of, hey, I'm not going to demand to be the GM when you hire me in the NFL.
I wonder if he wants to go back.
You would think so, right?
I think going to Boston College is a sign that he wants to go somewhere where he's going to have some job security. I think he wants to be closer to Boston hospitals because of his son, Jack. And I don't know how long he'll be here, but I feel like you go to a place like this, which is close to where you grew up, because you want to stay here for a while. This is a school that has pretty difficult academic restrictions that are on it. And it's one of the reasons that while they do occasionally have good football programs, it's not one of those ones where everyone in the city is living and dying by the team. They're an afterthought in New England. People don't really like college football. They aren't really that into college football. In Boston College is this private school that's like on the cusp of being Ivy League caliber.
Yeah, it's just like would they have to be like in the college football playoff for people to care?
Even then, I don't know if they'd care.
Really?
Because a lot of people get annoyed by Boston College people.
Gotcha.
At least having grown up in the area.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I feel like he went there not because he's looking to get another head coaching gig there. I do wonder how many of those regrets he's talking about are actually authentic. Because, I mean, he did take as much power as he could here in ways that are surprising. That's really all I can share on that side of things.
Yeah,
I mean, he put in a serious effort to first make sure that he had a general manager he was in alignment with, but then to actually just become the actual general manager because he didn't trust that guy was doing what he wanted them to do.
Yeah, and some of the stuff we've heard about Bill O'Brien, like it just fits better with the college game than the pro game. You could yell at an 18, 19-year-old kid and tell him that he has too many baby mamas, and it's not a big deal. You do it to DeAndre Hopkins, it's not going to go over very well.
It probably would be a big deal today at the college level, but you're right. If it's somebody that's established like Hopkins, yikes, that's going to be a disaster. And that ultimately led to the end of DeAndre Hopkins' time in Houston. And Hopkins had many issues here, I think, with just the actual roster going all the way back to in 2017 before that game against the Seattle Seahawks, where the Texans basically staged a walkout at practice after Bob McNair's comments had been leaked about the inmates running the prison at the NFL meetings to discuss the anthem protests, the taking a knee.
Yeah.
Hopkins and this organization, I feel like we're in a rather fractured place for a long period of time. And while DeAndre Hopkins might have mended that for a little bit of time, it clearly wasn't that long of a time.
It didn't take much for it to be unraveled.
Right, exactly. And I mean, that was why Dwayne Brown ultimately forced his way out of town, too. Got traded to Seattle. But to bring it back to Bill O'Brien, who was on this episode of Next Up with Adam Breneman, who, as you said, Joe, former All-American and Penn State alum, I'm assuming, yes, a Bill O'Brien recruit. O'Brien, this is where it gets a little bit revisionist, said that, sure, we made some controversial moves when I was in charge of the roster in Houston, but we did some good things too.
When we were running it at the Houston Texans, yeah, we made some controversial decisions, but, we made some good decisions too. We traded some top picks for Laramie Tunsil. Laramie Tunsil is one of the greatest left tackles in the history of the game, in my opinion. And he still plays there. I don't think he gave up many sacks this past year. Yeah. So there's other examples of guys that we brought in there that were really good players that we made decisions as when I was general manager or when I was doing it with somebody else. So it wasn't like it was all terrible. Now, the media narrative is it's terrible.
Trust me, I know.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, right, exactly. But for me, just personally, it's more about being a coach,
right.
and that's what I love to do. That's who I am.
I can get him wanting to just be a coach. But this media narrative idea that it was, for the most part, good while he was running the show. Trading 2 first-round picks for Laramie Tunsil was a lot. Maybe that was the only way that you were going to get a great left tackle. Maybe Laramie Tunsil, I'm not someone who studies offensive linemen, is one of the best offensive linemen to ever play the game. But the DeAndre Hopkins trade happened for just a second-round pick for David Johnson, who O'Brien liked, much in the same way that he liked running back Chris Polk, who had played well against him for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2014. They bring him on in 2015 as part of Hard Knocks. I feel like there is a certain moment in time where O'Brien has to be honest with everybody here and say, yeah, I was really bad at it. You can't say that there was a narrative about it. No, the roster construction and the just complete oversight when it came to the importance of draft picks were problems, because if it was one trade we're talking about, that's one thing, but you have to be able to get more in return via a trade, and you have to be better when it comes to making contracts happen. And if you felt like you weren't capable of doing all of those things, then why did you push so hard to get all of those things?
You know what the quote just like, it just in my, as he's talking, I'm just like, all I hear is 9-7, Brian. Like media narrative. We accomplished a lot of good things. 9-7, Brian. Like they won the AFC South. Back-to-back champs of the AFC South, Brian. Like that's what I hear when I hear the quote. Like it's like he hasn't changed. He is the winningest coach in Texans franchise history. Congratulations. He is arguably one of the most successful coaches in the history of college to the NFL. Like when you look at win percentage and what he's accomplished, he is at the top. He's absolutely the most successful of the last decade of guys that have gone from college to the NFL because he's not Urban Meyer. But they were mediocre for the most part, and most of the decisions he made were mediocre. He traded 2 first-round picks for Laremy Tunsil, who, yes, is still here, who, yes, gave up very few sacks. But because you didn't negotiate a contract ahead of time, they bent you over a barrel and way overpaid him. And because of that, Nick Caserio had to probably overpay him again on his second contract just to keep him here. It's nice to hear Bill talk about it because I've been waiting for this. When he was at Bama, you weren't going to get any Texans content out of him. So it's nice to hear him talk about his time a little bit in Houston. And I do think he's a better coach than he is giving credit for. And maybe he'll win the ACC ones. It's not a hard conference to win. And then again, he probably will only coach in the ACC for 2 years before he's in the Big 12 or something.
I was going to say, it'll get easier if all the good teams leave.
Yeah, he probably won't be in the Big 12.
I don't know if he'll beat Florida State for an ACC title game, but
could he get there? Could he be the other team? Clemson's not that good.
Clemson's way better than Boston.
I know they are, but
Clemson's not that good, and they're way better than
Clemson doesn't take transfer portals, so...
I don't see him leaving Boston College unless Boston College finds itself out of the ability to play in the college football playoff with more alignment, which is certainly a possibility.
There could be he puts a couple solid BC years. I mean, when I say solid, I mean 7 wins. And then something happens at Penn State where they're not happy with Franklin, and they're like, Bill O'Brien, wasn't he awesome?
I don't think he wants to go back to that.
Oh, okay.
I really...
Does he want to go back to the NFL?
I've heard awful things about his time at Penn State. One time I remember we had I don't remember who I was producing for, but the Texans were getting ready to play the Steelers. And we had this Steelers writer on, and Jerry Dulac, I think is how you say his name. And they asked him about Bill O'Brien. And he went on this 3-minute tangent about how Bill O'Brien was the worst person on planet Earth based on how he treated members of the Penn State media and how he was just disrespectful to anyone. And part of that is that he hated being there. This is the perfect job for Bill. Honestly, there is no pressure. As long as he doesn't go winless every year, if he throws out a 6 or 7 win season and wins a bowl game, one every 3 years, he has a job for life, probably.
I got to push back on Dulac saying all that stuff. I mean, who would want to be there? One, their fan base is psychotic. Two, they were
loony bins.
They were on another level of psycho in the wake of Joe Paterno getting ousted, and he still did a good job there.
Well, he sounded like one of those people you're describing. As he was talking about Bill O'Brien, you got hints of Paterno defender.
Interesting. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, O'Brien didn't want to do all that other stuff that Paterno was very well known for. Texter, have some respect for B.O.B. He is the best coach in Texans history. Can't wait for his induction in the Texans Ring of Honor. That is never going to happen because of all
would be so funny, though.
The bridges he burned and because of the way that he treated people behind the scenes there. That might have been something that was consistent at Penn State. I feel like it's a little more understandable at Penn State than it was when he was here.